We have been married 24 years, and you want a divorce?
I want a divorce. I'm tired of lying to you. I'm in love with another woman.
The day Cecilia Hartwell signed the divorce papers, she did not cry. She had already run out of tears 3 months earlier. The night she found a stranger's perfume on her husband's collar and watched him look straight into her eyes and lie without even flinching. That was the night something inside her quietly closed. She had loved Edmund Hartwell for 24 years, built a home with him, raised their son, folded away her own dreams the way you fold a dress you tell yourself you will wear someday, and never do. She had believed for a very long time that loving someone well was enough to make them stay. It was not enough. Edmund came home that Tuesday evening in March, smelling of a woman named Vivian Cross, 29 years old, a junior associate at his law firm, with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been broken yet. He sat across from Cecilia at the kitchen table, where they had shared 1,000 dinners, and told her he wanted a divorce. No build-up, no remorse. He slid the papers across the table like he was closing a business deal he had already moved on from. "You've been comfortable your whole life, Cece," he said. The way her name sounded in his mouth made her feel like something old and unwanted. "Comfortable isn't living. I need more than this." She looked at him for a long moment. 24 years. She picked up the pen. She signed. What Edmund did not know, what nobody in their small Connecticut town of Millbrook knew, was that 6 months later, Cecilia would walk through a door that would stop his heart cold, expose everything he thought he knew about his quiet wife, and make Vivian Cross wish with everything she had that she had chosen a very different man. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Cecilia had grown up in a modest house on the edge of Whitmore Valley, 3 hours north of Hartford. Her father, George Alderton, repaired clocks for a living. He wore the same brown cardigan every winter, drove a car older than most marriages on their street, and said very little. He was kind in the way quiet men are kind, without fuss, without fanfare. When he died 2 years before the divorce, he left Cecilia a small sealed envelope. Inside, in his careful handwriting, was a single line. "When the time comes, call Mr. Finch in Ashford. He will explain everything." She tucked the envelope into the back of her wardrobe and forgot about it. There was always something else to do. Edmund's schedule to manage, dinners to organize, a household that ran on her effort and credited itself to no one. The morning after she signed the divorce papers, she found the envelope again. She called the number. Mr. Gerald Finch was 78 years old and had been George Alderton's closest friend for 43 years. George, of course, was Cecilia's father. Mr. Finch did not ask her to come to him. He drove 3 hours to her door, arrived with a leather briefcase and a gentle smile, and sat with her at that same kitchen table where the papers had been signed just hours before. He told her everything. George Alderton, your late father, had never been just a clock repairman. Over 4 decades, he had quietly built Alderton Capital, patient investments, land holdings across 7 states, a private portfolio that grew steadily in the background of his cardigan and old car life. He had used it, year after year, to fund rural schools, women's shelters, community libraries, hospice gardens, all of it done without a single plaque, without a single press mention, just the good done and left behind. Everything now belonged to Cecilia. "How much?" she whispered. Mr. Finch folded his hands on the table. $3.3 billion, he said. conservatively. The room went completely silent. She looked down at her hands. These hands that had cooked Edmund's dinners, managed his calendar, smiled at his colleagues. These same hands. She did not cry. Something far stronger than tears was moving through her, and it felt, for the first time in a very long time, like the beginning of something. She told no one. Not her son Thomas, 22 and finishing his degree, with his grandfather's steady eyes. Not her sister Patricia, who would have told her husband within the hour. Not her friend Donna, who loved her genuinely, but could not hold a secret longer than 48 hours. She hired a private legal team in Hartford, 4 people with no connection to Edmund or his firm. She spent 2 weeks in careful meetings, learning the full scope of what her father had built and what she was now capable of. Then she went to find a life. She bought a house in the hills outside Millbrook. Stone walls, a wide porch, a garden that was entirely, unapologetically hers. She planted things. She read books she had been meaning to read for 10 years. She let herself, slowly and deliberately, remember who she was before she became Edmund Hartwell's wife. It was through one of the Trust's community grants that she met Oliver Crane. Oliver was 51, an architect who had spent 20 years designing the buildings nobody photographed, but everybody needed. Reading rooms, community halls, hospice gardens in towns the rest of the world had stopped paying attention to. He was serious about his work. He was not particularly serious about very much else. He arrived at Cecilia's house one Wednesday morning to discuss a new reading room project and found her on the porch in a paint-stained shirt, having a firm one-sided argument with a climbing rose that was growing in completely the wrong direction. He stood at the gate and watched for a moment. "They never listen," he said. She turned, hair loose, a pencil behind her ear. She looked at him directly, with nothing performed about it. "Oliver Crane," she said. "Cecilia Alderton," he said back. They shook hands. Neither of them let go quite as quickly as the situation required. They worked together for 3 months. He came twice a week. They argued about windows and light and what a room needed to feel like to make someone want to stay. She had strong opinions, precise, detailed, earned. He disagreed with her on 4 separate points. They resolved every single one into something better than either of them had started with. By the 2nd month, he was staying for dinner. By the 3rd, they were talking long after the plates were cleared, the evening gone full dark outside. He made her feel, in the simple, unremarkable moments of an ordinary Wednesday night, like someone genuinely worth being in a room with. Edmund had not kissed her in 5 years, not once, not on a birthday, not on a holiday, not on a single evening when she had dressed carefully and quietly hoped. She had grown so used to being invisible that she had nearly convinced herself warmth was something that happened to other people. One evening in November, Oliver stopped at the door just before leaving. He turned back. He looked at her in the warm hallway light. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he said quietly. "A real one, not a working dinner. One where I'm not looking at blueprints." "What will you be looking at instead?" she asked. "You," he said simply. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Saturday, 7 o'clock. He nodded once and walked out into the cold night. She closed the door and stood against it, her hand pressed flat against her chest, feeling something she had not felt in so long she had almost convinced herself it was gone. Saturday came. He arrived in a dark coat and brought her a single white lily, not roses, he had noticed she had a complicated relationship with roses, and said nothing about it, just handed it over and waited. They went to a small Italian restaurant. Candlelight. A corner table that felt like it had been waiting for exactly this conversation. They talked for 4 hours. The kind of talking that feels easy, not because the subjects are light, but because the person across from you makes every subject feel safe. He walked her to her door at the end of the night. They stood on the porch in the cold air, the Connecticut sky sharp and full of stars. He reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair from her face. His hand rested at her cheek for just a moment, warm against the cold night. "Cecilia," he said, just her name. She did not answer. She simply closed her eyes. He kissed her slowly, softly, the kind of kiss that has nowhere else to be and knows it. She had forgotten a kiss could feel like this, like being seen, like being chosen, like arriving somewhere you did not know you had been traveling toward. When he pulled back, she kept her eyes closed for one more second. Then she opened them, and he was smiling, the quiet kind that lives in the eyes more than the mouth. "Good night, Cecilia." "Good night, Oliver." She went inside, leaned against the closed door, and felt her own heartbeat announcing itself like it was introducing her to herself for the very first time. Weeks passed, and quietly, in the background, something big was being prepared. Mr. Finch came to her with an idea, a gala, a formal introduction evening hosted by Alderton Capital Trust, bringing together every landowner, developer, investor, and business partner whose work touched the Trust's interests across New England. Many of these people had been doing business with the Trust for years without ever knowing who stood behind it, who owned it, who ultimately held the power. It was time they knew. "You are not a footnote, Cecilia," Mr. Finch said firmly. "You are the entire story. It is time we told it properly." 300 invitations went out. Executives, civic leaders, architects, landowners, investors. Among the names on the guest list was Edmund Hartwell's firm. Edmund accepted the invitation without a second thought. He was coming expecting a routine business evening. Vivian Cross on his arm, expecting, as he always did, to be the most important person in the room. Cecilia read his name on the list. She said nothing. She set the list down and went to find a dress. The gala was held at the Grand Hartfield in downtown Hartford. Chandeliers, marble floors, 300 people, executives, landowners, civic leaders, investors, architects. Edmund arrived in a charcoal suit, Vivian beside him in black gown, his most polished smile already in position. He found a table near the front. Vivian straightened his lapel. He felt, as he usually did in rooms like this, entirely at ease. Gerald Finch stepped to the podium. The room settled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, in the unhurried voice of a man who has earned the right to take his time. "Before we proceed, I want to tell you about a man most of you never met." Edmund swirled his wine. George Alderton was a clock repairman from Hartford. He drove an old car. He wore the same cardigan every winter. He had no interest in recognition or press or having his name on anything. But over 40 years, George Alderton quietly built one of the most significant private investment trusts in New England. He used it, consistently and without a single word of credit, to fund rural schools, community libraries, women's shelters, and civic infrastructure in towns that everyone else had forgotten. He was the finest man I ever had the privilege of calling my friend. The room was completely still. George passed 2 years ago. Everything he built transferred to his only child. She is in this room tonight. She is the active director of Alderton Capital. Her net worth stands at $3.3 billion. A wave of murmuring moved through the room. Edmund set his glass down. She is one of the most remarkable women I have ever known. Her father raised her to believe that character matters more than credit. She has lived every day of her life by that principle. He looked toward the back of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, with everything this room has, Miss Cecilia Alderton. The doors opened. She walked in. The applause started before the room had fully processed what it was seeing. That instinctive response to something that commands a space before it has said a single word. She wore a royal blue gown, structured at the shoulders, sweeping to the floor, catching the chandelier light with every step. Her hair was styled elegantly with light makeup. She carried herself with the quiet authority of a woman who has finally, after a very long time, stopped making herself smaller to fit someone else's idea of her. She walked across that marble floor like she had always known this was exactly where she was going. 300 people rose to their feet. Edmund Hartwell did not. He sat frozen. The color had left his face entirely. He was looking at the woman he had called comfortable, the woman he had handed divorce papers to across a kitchen table, walking into a room of 300 people like she owned the ground beneath every single one of their feet, because she did. Edmund, do you know her? Vivian leaned toward him. He did not answer. Cecilia spoke from the front of the room, clearly, warmly, without a single wasted word, about her father's vision, about the trust, about the work she intended to continue. She did not perform. Every word carried the weight of someone who had earned the right to say it. When she finished, 300 people gave her a standing ovation. Edmund crossed the room. He left Vivian without a word, without even a glance, and moved quickly through the crowd until he reached Cecilia near the edge of the stage. Cece, she turned. His face was completely undone. The composure of 24 years of marriage, gone. He looked at her the way a man looks when the full cost of a decision lands on him all at once. Look at you, he said, voice barely steady. How did this happen, Cece? When did all of this become yours? I shared a life with you for 24 years, and I never knew. I never even asked. She looked at him calmly, not cold, not sharp, simply clear. It happened, Edmund, she said quietly, because it was always there. You just never thought to look. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I know it. Cece, I am so sorry. His eyes were wet. People nearby were watching. He did not care. He reached for her hand. Then slowly, in front of 300 people, Edmund Hartwell went down on one knee. A silence moved across the room like a held breath. I was wrong, he said. His voice broke. About you, about what I had, about what mattered. Please, Edmund. Her voice was soft, gentle, final, the way a door sounds when it closes properly for the last time. Stand up, he looked up at her. Please stand up because I am not God, she said again. He stood. I forgive you, Cecilia said, and she meant every word. But forgiveness is not the same as going back, and I am not going back. She held his gaze one steady moment. I wish you well, Edmund. I truly do. She turned away. Oliver Crane had been watching from across the room. He made his way toward her, unhurried, certain, the way a man moves when he knows exactly who he is walking toward. Deep navy suit, the quiet energy of someone who had spent 20 years building things that mattered and needed no one's approval about it. He touched her elbow lightly. She turned and her whole face changed. Not dramatically, just warmly, the way a room feels different the moment the right person walks in. "You were extraordinary," he said quietly. "Thank you, Oliver," she said softly. He offered his hand. "Can we dance?" She glanced at the floor where the orchestra had begun, a slow, sweeping waltz. "I should warn you," she said. "I trained in ballet for 12 years. I should warn you, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." She laughed, free and full. The kind of laugh that had been gone from her life for years and was now simply, completely back. "Then follow my lead," she said. She took his hand. They danced. She moved beautifully, grace that had become so natural, it no longer looked like effort. He was not trained, but he was strong and attentive, holding her with the confidence of a man who may not know the steps, but is absolutely certain about the person in his arms. They found their rhythm quickly. The room noticed. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. At one point he said something low near her ear that made her laugh and tip her head back, and he pulled her slightly closer when she did. And the room felt it. That quiet, unmistakable recognition of two people who are exactly where they are supposed to be. Edmund stood at the edge of the dance floor and watched. He watched Oliver look at Cecilia the way Edmund had not looked at anyone in years, with his complete, undivided, unhurried attention. And he understood, with a completeness that went past thought, exactly what he had done. Not the money, not the $3.3 billion that had been sitting quietly inside the woman he had called comfortable. Her. Just her. He had thrown her away. A few moments later, Edmund left early. He did not say goodbye to anyone, not the guests, not his colleagues, not even Vivian. Vivian noticed him heading for the exit and hurried after him, weaving through the crowd, her heels clicking sharp and fast against the marble floor. "Edmund," she caught his arm at the door. "Where are you going? The evening is not over." He kept walking. She followed him out into the cold Hartford night, the grand doors of the Hartfield closing behind them. "Edmund, are you seriously leaving me here?" He reached his car. He opened the door. He got in. She stood there, arms folded against the cold, certain he would turn around. He did not turn around, but he did not drive away either. The window rolled slowly down. He looked at her, really looked at her, and what was in his eyes was not love, not guilt, not even anger. It was something worse. It was clarity. "I left a woman who loved me for 24 years because of you, Vivienne. 24 years. A woman who built my home, raised my son, and stood beside me without a single complaint. And I threw every last bit of it away." He paused. "Tonight I watched her walk into a room of 300 people as a billionaire. I watched her dance with a man who sees her the way I never did. I got down on my knees in front of everyone, and she looked at me with nothing but pity." His jaw tightened. "I left my wife of 24 years for you, and all I have reaped is the fruit of my own wickedness." Vivian opened her mouth. "Don't," he said quietly. The window rolled back up. He drove away. 2 blocks down the road, he pulled over, and Edmund Hartwell, the powerful, untouchable Edmund Hartwell, sat alone in the dark and wept like a baby. No composure, no performance, just a man and the full weight of everything he had thrown away. She stood alone on the stone steps of the Grand Hartfield, the cold night wrapping around her, watching his tail lights shrink and vanish into the darkness. Then she sat down on the steps, black dress, cold stone, empty hands, and she wept, not for love, but for everything she had gambled on this man and lost. Inside, the gala glowed on. Inside, Cecilia Alderton was still dancing. 4 months later, the Whitmore development collapsed. Edmund's company. Without Cecilia's land parcels, the entire project was dead. The consortium walked away. 18 months of his best work, gone overnight. His firm quietly moved him sideways, away from the big deals, away from the headlines, away from everything he had spent his career building. The man who had once promised Vivian the world was now sitting behind a desk that nobody important visited. Vivian lasted 4 more months. Then she packed her bags and left without looking back. Edmund did not argue. He sat alone in his apartment that night, the city moving on outside his window, completely unbothered by him. He looked at his own hands. "I did this," he said quietly. "I used my own hands to destroy everything I had." The silence had nothing to offer him, because he was not wrong. A few days later, life offered something far better. Oliver proposed, not at a restaurant, not with an audience. On her porch, in the early November light, before the day had properly started. He held a diamond ring he had bought 2 weeks ago, the kind that carries weight not because of what it cost, but because of who will wear it. He did not make a speech. He just held it out and said, "I know who I am when I am with you. I have not always been able to say that. I would like to spend the rest of my life being this version of myself." She looked at him. The climbing rose behind him had finally, stubbornly, turned and begun to grow in the right direction. "Yes," she said, simply. He put the ring on her finger. He kissed her, and she closed her eyes completely, the way she had learned to close them around him, with nothing guarded, nothing held back. The way you can only be kissed by someone who knows the full weight of who you are and has chosen you anyway. Not a version of you, not a convenient version, just you. Cecilia called Thomas that evening and told him about Oliver. There was a long pause on the other end. "Mum," he said softly, "does he make you happy?" "Yes," she said. "He really does." She heard him smile through the phone. "Then that is everything," he said. He drove up to Millbrook that weekend to spend time with his mum. Within an hour, he and Oliver were deep in conversation at the kitchen table, laughing, talking, completely at ease, while Cecilia watched quietly from across the room. Her 2 people, getting along just fine. She did not say anything. She just made the tea and smiled to herself. That was enough. They married in the spring, the garden, white peonies everywhere. Thomas walked his mother down the stone path to where Oliver stood in the afternoon light. And when Oliver saw her coming, his face did something that made Thomas quickly look away, because it was too private a thing to witness directly. The look of a man who cannot believe his own life. Mr. Finch sat in the front row and wept without any attempt to hide it. Thomas stood beside Oliver as best man and cried exactly once when his mother laughed during the vows, because it was her real laugh, the free one, the one that had been gone for years and was now clearly, permanently back. They built a full life together. Oliver designed. Cecilia ran the trust the way her father had taught her, without ever sitting her down to teach her. Quietly, purposefully, with more interest in the good being done than in anyone knowing she was doing it. New projects across Connecticut, a school wing in Vermont, a reading room in every valley her father had ever loved. Thomas came to work alongside her, Sunday dinners together, every week without fail. Oliver cooked enthusiastically and badly. Cecilia quietly fixed things from the other side of the kitchen while he wasn't watching. Thomas pretended not to notice any of it, and it was exactly the kind of warm, imperfect, laughing Sunday that only a genuinely happy family can make. There was a morning in late October, the hills gold above the valley, the air cold and clean, when Cecilia stood at the kitchen window with her coffee, and Oliver came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her and rested his chin on her shoulder. They stood there together, watching the morning come in. She thought about her father in his old car, driving these hills, fixing his clocks, doing the quiet work. She thought about the envelope in the back of the wardrobe. She thought about the kitchen table and the pen and the papers and the moment she had believed her life was ending. It had not been ending. It had been clearing, making room, pulling back like a tide so that something enormous could finally come in. "Dad knew," she said softly. "What did he know?" Oliver asked. She watched the light move across the valley. "That I was going to be more than all right," she said. "He just knew I needed time to find it myself." Oliver pressed a long, slow kiss to the side of her head. Outside, the climbing rose had grown fully now, stubborn, beautiful, entirely in its own direction, which turned out, as it always does, to be exactly the right one. Some women are buried quietly by the lives they were handed. Cecilia Alderton was not that woman. She just became $3.3 billion, a royal blue gown, a man who brought her a lily because he noticed she had a complicated relationship with roses, and a climbing rose that finally grew in the right direction. If this story found you today, maybe it was meant to. Share it with someone who is in pain right now, someone who is holding on by a thread, someone who gave everything to the wrong person and is sitting alone tonight, wondering if anything good is ever coming for them. Tell them, it is coming. It is already on its way. It was just waiting for the clearing. And if this story moved something in you, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay close. Because there are more stories like this one coming. Stories about people who got knocked all the way down and came back as something the world wasn't ready for. You won't want to miss a single one.